Sometimes loneliness speaks louder than common sense. Samuel watched the dusty road that cut through his property like a scar in the heart of Texas. The 42-year-old man had hands calloused from hard work and eyes that carried the weight of 10 years of solitary life. His farm prospered, the cattle fattened in the green pastures that he himself had conquered from the arid land. But the nights were too long and the silence heavy as lead. The letter had been folded in his shirt pocket for 3 months, paper yellowed by sweaty hands, ink smudged by time and anxiety. Martha Wellington, 28 years old, the daughter of a pastor, was looking for a serious and hard-working husband in the West. The photograph showed a delicate woman with clear eyes and a shy smile. Samuel had responded the same week, describing his farm, his plans, his need for company. The months that followed were a mixture of hope and terror. Samuel renovated the house, built a new room, bought fine fabrics in the nearest town. Each morning he looked at the road expecting to see the cloud of dust that would announce the arrival of the stagecoach. Each afternoon he returned to his chores with a slightly heavier heart. The August heat made the air as thick as molasses when the dark spot on the horizon finally appeared. Samuel dropped the tool he was holding, wiped his hands on his pants, and walked to the porch. His heart beat like a war drum. The stagecoach was slowly approaching, swaying over the jagged stones of the path. The coachman pulled the reins and the horses stopped in front of the gate. Samuel descended the steps of the balcony with legs that seemed to be made of wood. A heavy hand pushed the carriage door from the inside. The wood creaked under the pressure. Samuel swallowed, adjusted his hat, and waited. The woman who stepped down from the stagecoach was twice the size of anyone Samuel had ever seen. It wasn't just high, it was immense. The shoulders broad as those of a bull, arms thick as tree trunks, hands that could break a horseshoe in half. The dark blue dress stretched at the seams and the buttons looked like they were about to explode. The face, however, retained the same light eyes as in the photograph, although they now appeared small compared to the rest of the body. Samuel was paralyzed. The mouth opened and closed without sound. The woman walked up to him with steps that made the ground shake. She stopped 2 meters away and watched him from top to bottom. The silence stretched out like a rope about to break. "You must be Samuel," she said, and her voice was surprisingly soft, almost musical. "I am Martha Wellington. My time has come to start a new life." The farmer nodded slowly, still unable to form words. Martha turned to fetch her luggage from the carriage, 2 huge suitcases that she carried with no apparent effort. The coachman waved and departed, leaving only the sound of hooves drifting away and the warm wind blowing between the two. Samuel looked at the house he had prepared with so much care. The bed he had ordered to be made seemed too small. The door seemed too narrow. Everything seemed too small. Martha waited in silence, holding the bags as if they were feathers. "The house is there." Samuel finally found his voice, hoarse and low. "I've prepared everything, as I could." Martha smiled, and for a moment Samuel saw the woman in the photograph hiding somewhere on that human mountain. She walked toward the house, and Samuel followed her, feeling like a child walking beside a giant. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky red like blood. Inside the house, Martha examined every corner with watchful eyes. He touched the furniture carefully, as if he feared breaking it. He opened the curtains that Samuel had hung, tested the solidity of the chairs. Everything seemed fragile under his touch. "It's a beautiful house," she said, and there was sincerity in her voice. "You took the trouble to tidy everything up." Samuel nodded, still processing the situation. The woman he had imagined beside him on the long, lonely nights was a delicate creature he would protect from the dangers of the West. The reality that now filled his room was something else entirely. Martha seemed capable of facing a pack of wolves with her bare hands. Night fell quickly, as it always did in the desert. Samuel lit his lanterns and prepared a simple meal. Martha sat down at the table, and the chair groaned under its weight. They ate in silence, each lost in his own thoughts. The sound of forks against the cymbals echoed loudly in the stillness of the house. When it was time to go to sleep, Samuel showed him the room he had prepared. Martha looked at the bed with an expression that could be amusement or despair. It was hard to tell. She turned to Samuel with a tired smile. "I think we'll have to make some adjustments," she said, and there was a sadness hidden in her voice that made Samuel's heart tighten. That night, Samuel slept in the barn, looking up at the stars through the cracks in the roof. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was clear: his life had changed forever, and not in the way he had imagined. Dawn has arrived with the crowing of the rooster and the weight of reality. Samuel woke up in the barn with the straw stuck to his hair and his body aching from the hard floor. Through the cracks in the wood, he saw Martha walking through the farmyard. She had found an axe in the shed and cracked wood with precise blows that echoed like gunshots in the morning air. Each log split in half at the first blow, and the pile of firewood grew rapidly. The farmer watched in silence, fascinated by the woman's natural strength. Martha worked with the efficiency of someone who knew heavy labor, without haste but without wasting movement. Sweat began to mark the blue dress on her back and under her arms, but she did not slow down. Samuel stood up slowly, dusting the straw from his clothes. He needed to take care of the animals, milk the cows, check the fences of the east pasture. The routine of the farm did not wait for personal dilemmas. He walked to the house to get the tools and found Martha in the kitchen preparing coffee in a toy-like pot in her huge hands. She turned when she heard his footsteps and nodded. The gesture was simple, without embarrassment or explanations. Samuel grabbed his work knife and went out for his morning chores, leaving the aroma of strong coffee filling the house. In the corral, the cows mooed restlessly. They didn't know the smell of Martha and walked away when she approached. Samuel milked quickly, watching sideways as Martha explored the surroundings of the property. She walked with steady steps, examining the buildings, testing the strength of the fences with her hands. The morning went on with each one busy in their tasks. Martha had encountered problems that Samuel hadn't noticed. Loose planks in the chicken coop, a slanted fence that would soon give way, displaced tiles on the roof of the house. She would point out the defects and begin to repair them without waiting for instructions. Samuel watched her work and felt a strange mixture of relief and confusion. For years he had faced all the problems of the farm alone. Seeing Martha mending a fence as easily as he would tie a shoelace was comforting and disturbing at the same time. The sun rose relentlessly when the first visitors arrived. 3 men on horseback appeared on the road, kicking up clouds of dust. Samuel recognized Jake Morrison, the owner of the neighboring farm, accompanied by 2 of his cowboys. They came towards the house with curiosity stamped on their faces. Martha was on the roof, replacing the displaced tiles. Its silhouette against the blue sky drew attention as a monument. The horsemen slowed down as they approached, clearly impressed by what they saw. Jake Morrison dismounted first and walked up to Samuel with a wide smile on his sunburned face. The man was known for his sharp tongue and lack of tact. His eyes couldn't tear away from Martha, who continued to work on the roof without paying attention to the visitors. Samuel felt the heat rising up his neck. He knew that kind of situation well. In a small community like theirs, news spread faster than fire in dry grass. Martha's arrival would be a topic in taverns for weeks. The cowboys whispered to each other, pointing discreetly to the roof. Samuel clenched his fists, but kept his expression neutral. Martha stepped down from the roof with surprising agility for her size and walked over to the group. His steps made the ground shake slightly. Jake Morrison took off his hat in an exaggerated gesture of courtesy. His eyes shone with barely concealed malice. The 2 cowboys looked at each other and smiled. Samuel knew those smiles. He had grown up being targeted by them when he was younger and too thin for his own good. Martha stopped a few meters from the group and wiped her hands on her apron. His presence was imposing, almost intimidating. Jake Morrison swallowed, and his smile wavered for a moment. The cowboys stopped whispering. Samuel stepped forward, trying to control the situation before it got out of hand. He introduced Martha as his wife, using a firm tone that brooked no comment. Jake nodded politely, but his eyes kept assessing Martha as if she were a curious animal at a fair. The conversation that followed was tense and full of implied ones. Jake asked questions about Martha's trip, about where she came from, about her family. Each question carried a hint of irony that made Samuel grit his teeth. Martha answered with monosyllables, maintaining a quiet dignity that impressed Samuel. When the visitors finally left, Samuel felt as if he had been through a storm. Martha returned to work without comment, but he noticed that her shoulders were more tense than before. The silence between them now carried a different weight. The rest of the day was spent in an awkward but functional routine. Martha finished tasks that would take Samuel days to complete on his own. She repaired the chicken coop, repaired the slanted fence, and even found time to weed the vegetable garden. Samuel tended the cattle and watched, trying to understand the woman who had come into his life like a tornado. At dusk, they sat on the porch to rest. The sky was painted orange and purple, and the night wind was beginning to blow cooler. Martha looked at the horizon with a thoughtful expression. Samuel wanted to say something, anything, but the words didn't come. Night fell slowly, bringing with it the chorus of crickets and the distant howling of coyotes. Samuel knew he needed to make a decision. He could send Martha away, make up an excuse, return the money she had spent on the trip, or he could accept that his life had changed irreversibly. Looking at Martha in the dim moonlight, Samuel noticed something he hadn't noticed before. Underneath all that awesome strength, there was a vulnerability that she was trying to hide. The way she looked away when she felt watched, how her shoulders curved slightly when she thought no one was watching. Martha Wellington had left everything behind to start a new life with a stranger. She had bet everything on a letter and a photograph, just as Samuel had done. The courage required to take such a step was perhaps greater than all his physical strength. Samuel made his decision that night, sitting on the porch under the Texas stars. It wouldn't be easy, but rarely were important things easy in the Wild West. Martha had come to stay, and he would do whatever it took to make it work. The weeks passed like pages turned by the desert wind. Samuel woke up every morning to the sound of Martha already working in the courtyard. She woke up before the sun and started her chores without fanfare. Coffee was always ready when Samuel came out of the barn, strong and warm as he liked. The routine was established naturally, without unnecessary words or embarrassment. The farm prospered in a visible way. Martha had the strength to do the work of 3 men, but she also possessed a keen eye for details that Samuel had lost through the years of loneliness. She noticed that cattle preferred to graze on the northern slope during warmer afternoons. He noticed that the chickens laid more eggs when the chicken coop faced east. Small observations that made a difference in the profits of the farm. Samuel began to see her as a work partner before anything else. Martha did not expect special treatment or romantic demonstrations. She worked alongside him as if she had been born for that life, adapting to the rhythm of the farm with impressive naturalness. The first rain of autumn arrived on a September afternoon. Clouds quickly gathered on the horizon, dark as coal against the orange sky. Samuel ran to collect the tools he had left scattered around the courtyard. Martha was repairing the corral fence when the first drops began to fall. The rain in the desert always came with violence. Within minutes, what were scattered drops turned into a raging storm. Samuel shouted for Martha to take cover, but the wind swallowed his voice. She continued working on the fence, soaking wet but determined to finish the repair before the storm worsened. Lightning cut through the sky, followed by thunder that made the earth tremble. The horses neighed in fright in the stable. Martha finally put down her tools and ran to the house, her heavy footsteps splashing mud in all directions. Inside the house, they looked at each other soaking wet and started laughing. It was the first time Samuel had heard Martha really laugh, a deep, musical sound that filled the house in a way he didn't expect. For a moment, the awkwardness between them completely disappeared. Martha changed in the room while Samuel lit the fireplace. When she came out, wearing a dry suit, he noticed for the first time how she moved with grace despite her size. There was a natural elegance to his gestures that he had lost in first impressions. The storm lasted all night. Samuel and Martha sat by the fireplace, listening to the rain beat on the roof and the wind howl through the cracks. They didn't say much, but the silence was comfortable now. Martha sewed a patch on Samuel's shirt while he checked the farm's accounts. It was during that night that Samuel realized that he had stopped thinking of Martha as a mistake or a mistake. She had become part of the farm, part of his routine, part of his life. The loneliness that had plagued him for so many years had disappeared without him realizing it. The next morning brought an unexpected problem. The stream that cut through the property had overflowed during the rain, washing away part of the southern fence and scaring off a dozen head of cattle. Samuel found the animals scattered around the neighboring valley, grazing peacefully on Jake Morrison's property. Martha accompanied him to collect the cattle. They walked through the still cool mud, following the footprints of the lost animals. The morning sun caused steam to rise from the wet earth, creating a low mist that made it difficult to see. They found Jake Morrison and two of his men already gathering Samuel's cattle. The neighbor smiled when he saw them approaching, but there was something different in his eyes. During the weeks that had passed, news about Martha had spread throughout the region. People talked about Samuel's giant woman with a mixture of curiosity and derision. Jake made comments about how convenient it was to have such a strong woman to help with the cattle. His men laughed at the thinly disguised jokes. Samuel felt anger growing in his chest, but Martha remained unmoved. She helped gather the animals with professional efficiency, completely ignoring the teasing. The confrontation came when one of Jake's cowboys made a comment about how Samuel needed a ladder to kiss his wife. Martha stopped what she was doing and slowly turned to the man. He didn't say a word, just looked at him with an expression that made the cowboy swallow hard and take a step back. Samuel stepped forward, placing himself between Martha and the provocateurs. His voice came out low and firm as he said it was time to take the cattle back. Jake nodded quickly, realizing that the situation was about to spiral out of control. On the way back home, Samuel and Martha drove the cattle in silence. Samuel burned inside, furious at the lack of respect from his neighbors. Martha walked beside him with a serene expression, as if nothing had happened. It wasn't until they arrived at the farm that Martha finally spoke up about the incident. She said she had faced teasing all her life and had learned that some people always found reasons to ridicule others. The important thing was not to let it change who she was. Samuel realized at that moment that Martha was stronger inside than outside. She had developed a quiet courage that he admired. The way he handled teasing showed a dignity that many men he knew did not possess. That night, for the first time since Martha's arrival, Samuel didn't sleep in the barn. He arranged a mattress in the living room and lay down by the fireplace. Martha had offered to sleep in the living room, but he insisted that she stay in the room. It was a small gesture of respect that she accepted with a grateful smile. The stars shone through the living room window when Samuel finally fell asleep. For the first time in a long time, he felt protected in his own home. Martha had brought more than physical strength to his farm. She had brought a sense of security and companionship that he didn't know he was looking for. Autumn advanced, painting the few trees in the region with golden tones. Samuel and Martha worked side by side, preparing the farm for the winter. They repaired fences, stocked up on firewood and fodder, checked the roof of the house and stables. The farm had never been so well cared for. Samuel began to notice that neighbors came to visit him less often. The provocations had decreased, but so had the social visits. He and Martha were becoming an island of two in an ocean of distrust and curiosity of others. But for the first time in his adult life, Samuel didn't care what others thought. Martha had taught him without words that some people were worth more than the approval of an entire community. The farm thrived, they worked well together, and the loneliness that had dominated their life for so long was but a distant memory. Winter came earlier that year, bringing with it biting winds and freezing nights that made the woods of the house creak like old bones. Samuel woke up one December morning to the sound of ice breaking in the buckets of water outside. Martha was already in the kitchen, feeding the wood stove with the dry twigs they had gathered during the fall. The warmth spread through the house like a welcoming embrace, driving away the cold that tried to infiltrate through the cracks. During the months of living together, Samuel had learned to read Martha's small signs, the way she stirred her coffee when she was worried, how his shoulders tensed when he heard horses approaching, how she smiled from the corner when she was satisfied with some job well done, small details that revealed the woman behind the impressive strength. On that freezing morning, Samuel noticed something different about Martha. She moved slower than usual, and there was a melancholy in her eyes that he couldn't identify. When she poured her coffee, her hands trembled slightly, and it wasn't because of the cold. Samuel finished his morning chores quickly and returned to the house. He found Martha sitting in the rocking chair he had made for her a few weeks earlier. The ordinary chair had broken under his weight, and Samuel had spent 3 days building a new, sturdier, more comfortable one. Martha swayed slowly, looking out the window at the frost-covered landscape. It was then that Samuel noticed the silent tears streaming down Martha's face. They were not tears of physical pain, but of deeper suffering that she had carried in silence for months. Samuel approached slowly and knelt next to the chair. Martha closed her eyes and took a deep breath before speaking. She told about her life before Texas, about how she had been ridiculed since she was a child for her size, how men fled when they saw her, how women whispered behind her back, how she had spent years taking care of her sick father, watching the years go by without hope of finding someone who would accept her as she was. Samuel's letter had been his last hope. She had saved every penny for the trip, sold everything she owned, left behind the only life she knew. During the long train ride, she had imagined 1,000 times the moment when Samuel would see her for the first time. She had prepared herself for rejection, but it still hurt more than she expected. Samuel listened in silence, feeling the weight of each word. He realized that Martha had been brave beyond anything he could imagine. Leaving everything behind and traveling into the unknown required a strength that went far beyond the muscles. It was a strength of spirit that he was just beginning to understand. When Martha finished speaking, Samuel was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out and touched her face, wiping away the tears with his calloused thumb. For the first time since they met, he really looked at Martha, not at her size or her strength, but at the woman who had chosen to trust him with her life. Samuel told of his own loneliness, of the empty nights he had spent imagining what it would be like to have someone to share the burdens of life. As he had written that letter, not only looking for a wife, but a true companion. How Martha had become just that, even if in a way he hadn't anticipated. The conversation lasted into the morning. They talked about fears, hopes, about the months they had spent learning to live together. Samuel realized that he had fallen in love with Martha without realizing it, not the woman in the photograph he had imagined, but the real woman who worked alongside him every day. Martha confessed that she had learned to love the farm, the routine, the feeling of being useful and valued. For the first time in her life, she felt at home. He didn't need to hide or apologize for who he was. Samuel saw her as an equal partner, not as a curiosity or a burden. Midday brought unexpected visitors. A settler family appeared on the road, traveling in a wagon loaded with their belongings. The man was sick, the woman was carrying a small baby, and 2 children huddled under torn blankets. They had lost their farm to creditors and were traveling west in search of a fresh start. Martha was the first to stand up to help. She prepared hot soup while Samuel settled the family in the living room. The sick man was placed near the fireplace. The children were fed. The baby was warmed. The family spent 3 days on Samuel and Martha's farm, regaining strength to continue the trip. During those 3 days, Samuel saw a side of Martha that touched him deeply. She cared for the sick man with infinite kindness, played with the children, helped the woman with the baby. Her strength wasn't just physical. It was emotional, spiritual, an ability to give love and care that transformed everything around her. When the family left, they took with them supplies that Samuel and Martha insisted on giving: money, food, new blankets. The woman hugged Martha with tears in her eyes, thanking them for having found angels in the middle of the desert. That night, Samuel and Martha sat on the porch despite the cold. The stars shone with crystal clarity in the clear winter sky. Samuel realized that he had found something he didn't know he was looking for. Not just a wife, but a soulmate who shared his values and his vision of life. Martha held Samuel's hand for the first time, his fingers intertwined naturally, and Samuel felt a peace he hadn't experienced since childhood. They didn't need words to express what they felt. The connection was real, deep, built on months of working together and mutual respect. Spring has arrived, bringing new life to the farm. Martha planted a garden that flourished like never before. Samuel built a larger table for the kitchen, one that would comfortably seat both of them. They renovated the house together, enlarging rooms, reinforcing structures, creating a real home. The neighbors still looked on curiously when Samuel and Martha went to town, but now there was respect mixed with curiosity. The farm was visibly prospering, and Samuel's happiness was evident to anyone who had eyes to see. Martha had become a part of the community through small acts of kindness and her unquestionable work ethic. One afternoon in April, Samuel found Martha in the garden, kneeling among the rows of vegetables that grew vigorously under his care. The afternoon sun illuminated her hair, and she hummed softly as she worked. Samuel stopped to watch her, marveling at the silent miracle that had happened in his life. Martha looked up and smiled at him, a smile that contained the entire journey they had traveled together. From initial embarrassment to solid partnership, from fear to trust, from loneliness to true love. Samuel smiled back, knowing that he had found exactly what his heart needed, even if it wasn't what his mind had imagined. That night, for the first time since Martha had arrived, Samuel did not sleep in the living room. They shared the room and the bed he had ordered to be made especially for her. Not as strangers fulfilling an obligation, but as husband and wife who had chosen to build a life together. The lone farmer was no longer lonely. Martha had filled the empty spaces in his life in a way he had never imagined possible, and Martha had found the home and love she had been looking for all her life. Together, they built something stronger than either of them could have achieved alone. The night wind blew gently through the Texas fields, carrying with it the scent of Martha's garden flowers and the promise of bountiful harvests. On the farm that was now truly theirs, Samuel and Martha slept peacefully, knowing that they had found in each other not only a partner but a home for their souls. If this Wild West story has touched your heart, and you want more heartwarming narratives about courage, love, and redemption in the Badlands of Texas, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell.